Hello, and welcome to the very first video edition of the Ad Age Insider podcast. Today is January 16th, and this week, the big marketing story that I have for you is lessons from the showroom floors of the industry's biggest January conventions. We're talking CES and the National Retail Federation's big show, and what marketers at those conventions aren't saying out loud in their 2026 forecasts. This is Ad Age Insider, where I'm taking you behind the scenes of the marketing industry's biggest stories alongside the reporters who actually wrote them. I'm your host, Parker Heron. Make sure to hit like and subscribe so that you're never behind on industry news. Okay, so you've probably seen on LinkedIn this year the big flow of predictions that have come down from executives at big companies. They're very polished. They're very how to win. Here's some dramatic change that's coming. Last week on this very podcast, we even did a roundup of those predictions and what they mean for marketers. But sometimes all of that can be a little bit of wishful thinking on the part of senior executives at these companies or agencies. So today, I have Ad Age's news editor E.J. Schultz and senior marketing reporter Adrianne Pasquarelli with me. E.J. went to CES earlier this month, and Adrianne is hot off of the National Retail Federation's big show. They're going to take us deep on how industry expectations for the new year are or are not matching up with reality. That means decoding what companies mean when they keep throwing out AI this, AI that, all the way to consumers' flight back to simplicity and what that means for marketing trends, and then the fears CMOs aren't talking about publicly. All right, let's get into it. Hey, EJ and Adrianne, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello, Parker. Good to be here.
Thanks.
As I mentioned in the intro, EJ, you are fresh off of CES, and Adrianne, you're right back from the NRF's big show. And I thought last week's episode of Ad Age Insider was all predictions, all people thinking, all people predicting, all people looking in the crystal ball. Y'all have actually been places. Y'all have heard from the marketers who are now living in the land of 2026 and creating and speaking about what's ahead. So I thought this would be an interesting time to check in on what industry leaders say versus what y'all saw from industry leaders. So that's where I'm at in the headspace. I had first question, a clarification I wanted that I think could be interesting. EJ, we typically send our tech reporters to CES, and I wondered why this year the leader of our marketing bee, EJ Schultz, was hitting Las Vegas instead. What's going on?
Because I drew the short straw? No, actually, Parker, I hadn't been to CS since 2020. It was January 2020. I'll never forget it because, I came back to Chicago and about a month later, the world shut down. So it's been, 5 years since I've been. And I would probably say this conference might be actually taking on more importance for brands because in that 5-year time span, technology has always been important when it comes to advertising, but given AI, given all the advancements in tech in the last 5 years, it's become, this conference has become more of a central place to gather and just sort of sort through it all. And for the CMOs that attended, for the marketing leaders that attended, it all, they're just being bombarded by pitches from ad tech companies, agencies now, all these agencies, companies like Omnicom, building their own so-called marketing operating systems, pitching them as these central one-stop shop places to plan, execute, and measure campaigns all through a singular interface. That all sounds great, but the takeaway for me is that we're still in the infancy of a lot of this stuff. If you look at the average CMO, they're still in the beginning stages of implementing all of this. So CS became sort of a place for them to almost network with other CMOs to see how are you handling this? Where am I falling short? What are you doing that I could do? So it's a classic industry event where it's an excuse to get together and talk about these kinds of problems. And then draws people from across the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. And what percentage of time did you spend reporting and what percentage was at the slot machine?
You know what? I have a lot of vices, but gambling is not one of them. So that's not a concern I had.
Okay, that's why they sent
big
you. They were
wins?
like, he's safe.
But I
so
do enjoy coming down, to get my like 5, 6 a.m. cup of coffee and seeing the person, smoking over the slot machine that's probably been there for hours. It's always just a nice perspective on humanity.
yeah, air quotes, cup of coffee. Yeah, we get what you're saying there. So, as I mentioned, at the end of the year, you were both heads down in our predictions, our 2026 Ad Age Business Forecast package, hearing from executives about what they're thinking about for the year ahead. Before you even hit the ground at the conferences you both went to, Adrienne, maybe kick us off. What were the ideas or the topics or products that you were most interested in going to NRF's big show to see or hear about?
Well, I mean, there these topics wouldn't be such a big surprise. I mean, it's everything that's top of mind for retailers right now. It's social commerce, stuff like TikTok Shop and AI, how AI is changing how people shop, how they consume content. And so, you look at the agenda, and even though it's not as big as CES, not as long lasting, it's overwhelming. But I picked out some of those topics, and tried to budgeted my time with meetings and see where I wanted to attend panels and what companies I wanted to hear from.
And what would you say, how did it hold up to your expectations? Was there anything surprising that you heard about those topics or anything that stood out against what you had been hearing in the buildup from, leaders talking end of year 2025 about this year?
I mean, one thing that I'll mention again is around TikTok Shop. Usually, some of these panels are just they're not as helpful as they can be. It's just, a lot of jargon, a lot of like, well, this could be a thing. But the panel I went to, it had some interesting speakers from PacSun, Crocs, and Tarte Cosmetics. And they actually had some real practical advice for what they're seeing is working for them. And I think that from that perspective, having advice like that for people in the room who maybe have not gone on TikTok Shop, Tarte's been there for like 2 years, 2.5 years. That kind of advice was actually fruitful, I think.
That's interesting. Getting out of the maybe in the past, all of this innovation had been like think, plan, and now we're kind of in the do mode.
Right. It was like, we write these forecasts and it's like, this will be a bigger thing. So it's already a big thing for these brands, and why, and how can you learn from that? And that was interesting for me, just to hear about how it's resonating. I mean, I think a big thing was that it's a retail channel for them, not just not a marketing channel. And so you have to think about it differently like that. And we always think of TikTok as marketing, but it's now that it's drawing in, linked to actual sales, that's different.
Yeah, that was actually, I mean, one of the themes actually at CES. I think there's some crossover here and just how just the lines are blurring across the board, right? Because the old traditional marketing approach, you had the funnel, the top of the funnel, you raise awareness, you go through a very prescriptive steps of ultimately leading into a sale, right? And now you could catch consumers at multiple places along that funnel and convert something that might be awareness into an instant sale because of the rise of things like TikTok Shop and all the social commerce tools that are out there now. There was a lot of talk about that in Las Vegas as well. So it's interesting that these two conferences were so close together. I think some
Yeah, a
speakers
lot
were
of
actually
people.
speaking at CS and then just were speaking also very, God bless them for doing that. Um,
Yeah, I always wonder how much of these executives' holidays are time off versus prep for all these conferences.
Yeah, I mean, we really should all form a pact and say no conferences until at least, the third week of January.
Yeah. EJ, I'm wondering, you obviously joined in on that one, but is there anything else from when you were thinking about 2026 to then actually being at CES was kind of an expectations versus reality on the ground?
I guess it's just the expectations of where we are with AI. I think that, one of the quotes I got from someone, I'm an observer, and this was sort of echoed throughout, is we're kind of moving from the theoretical curiosity phase into the implementation phase now. And so that's like, okay, it sounds great to like talk about all the possibilities of AI, But when you're the CMO, you're the brand leader now being charged to actually start implementing these things, that's when it gets complicated. And that's when the real pressure is on, because I think, they all have their CEOs looking over their shoulder, just expecting, because they're reading constantly how AI is creating all these efficiencies and shit. So they want, where's the efficiencies in my marketing department? So I feel like that is going to be a huge theme with 2026 in general, is just like who's able to implement these things in a way that makes sense, and not just to do it, but to do it to actually improve processes and improve your business.
Yeah, I actually that's a great transition into some of the questions I had. I figured AI would come up. We'd be talking a bit about it. It was just a guess, just a guess. But so I want to stick on that for a second. And something you said also is resonant with me, where AI has become such an all-encompassing word for this industry, like a blanket synonym for just kind of like innovation. We're investing in AI. We're developing with AI. We're all in on AI. But those statements often kind of forget the next question, like the how or in what way. So I'm curious, from each of your experiences at these conferences, did they in any way like add complexity to your understanding of AI or deepen your understanding of AI in any way? Did anything surprise you about AI on the ground?
Well, it's already so complex, so adding more complexity, just pile it all on. One thing that was interesting, that I heard about was Ralph Lauren came in and they talked about their Ask Ralph chatbot that it's a chatbot they developed, it's a styling tool. They came out in the fall with it, and we've heard so much about how chatbots can go off the rails and how they can be problematic. Um, According to Ralph Lauren, this has been, feedback has been great. It's something they plan to roll. It's out. It's for the Polo brand right now, but they're planning to roll it out, more on a global and brand level. It was interesting. They're partnering with Microsoft on it. And one thing that they talked about was how it's really a cross function between teams of like designers, technology experts, and the retail teams. And it's really this cross section of different departments that come in and work on something like this.
My observation, I think, is, because ultimately, everyone's pulling from the same small pool of AI tools, essentially. So, like, how are you using those tools to actually add value? And I think the industry risks, there's a commoditization risk here, right, where everyone's kind of using the same tools and doing the same things. So, like, how can you be smart about this and do it in a way that differentiates yourself, if that makes sense? I think commoditization of this stuff is a risk for 2026, and like I mean, you could view that through any lens, like, but from an agency perspective too, like how are they taking these AI tools and creating products for their clients that are different from what they get from agency X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, it's interesting. EJ, you did a great Q&A with Florian Adamski, who's the head of Omnicom Media, and obviously Omnicom, big news maker over the past few months with their acquisition of IPG. And you both talked quite a bit about, or you talked quite a bit with him about AI and how their innovation there is impacting marketers and what they can expect their clients. And that's an interesting, I guess, way of flowing off of what you just said to the reality. Like, what are you hearing from both him, but anyone else that you spoke about at CES of how brands are doing this and trying to differentiate themselves in the business marketplace?
I think from a brand leader perspective, I think people increasingly, like, there's a desire to have like one or two solutions, not have to deal with like 6 or 7 tools, right, to just plan my marketing. And I think, agencies are trying to meet that demand with these, this buzzword marketing operating system. I think from the agency's perspective, and a lot of them are presenting these tools as almost self-service platforms, right, where you hand over the keys to the brand and they can just go from there. The question I have is, do you risk sort of innovating yourself out of existence if you're an agency? Because the more that brands realize they can do these things themselves, So the response there from the agencies, does that mean you become more of like a SaaS platform provider and you sell a subscription to the tech products you're building? Omnicom and Flow, their response to that is no, the human expertise still really matters here. We still, have our people here guiding our clients through this process. That is still very important. Omnicom's new approach is, they've come up with a structured, I forget the exact term they use, but it's like these client success leaders that they're creating, right, to have this one-on-one connection with their clients. So those are some of the things that I've heard out there.
Yeah. Yeah, something that you're mentioning here on a high level, but also, Adrian, more directly with your example from Polo that's very consumer facing, that I'm wondering is, of course, you're both in situations at these conferences where everybody's like, woo, innovation, like, let's learn more, let's do more, let's make more. I wonder how much you felt these conferences existed in a bit of an AI hype vacuum. And not to use, personal experience as evidence at all, but when I get on my personal social feeds, like, it is top to bottom, like, AI, get it out of here. And I just wonder, was there any effort at these conferences to address consumer skepticism or, what the other side of all this innovation looks like and how it's received or perceived by people who are actually shopping from these brands or doing business with them?
I wouldn't say that there was a huge amount of that side of things. I mean, as journalists, we certainly see it, and it sounds like in your everyday life, you see it too. This idea of the AI slop. I think there's certainly a move to try to get away from that, but I didn't see a ton of pushback um, toward it.
I can answer that question on, obviously the huge part of CES when it used to actually be called the Consumer Electronics Show, and it's still a huge part of the show is to actually show off new consumer gadgets, electronics, everything across the board. One of the things I noticed was and we've been writing a lot about this at Ad Age, there is this desire, I think, amongst some consumers to just escape some of this, like overload, the screen overload, the algorithm overload. And it's funny because on the show floor, I'll never forget, I guess this has happened for a while, but like literally one of the exhibitors was pinball machines, like old school pinball machines, like a row of them in the middle of all these like robots and high-tech tools. And I got to say, there was like lines to play these pinball machines. So I think that, and then, yeah, it's good. So consumers, I mean, there's an element, I mean, you're at your job, you're being pressured to use AI everywhere. And there's just I think there's a little bit of desire to escape some of it. And so like, how can brands respond to that need? And I think that shows up a lot of way in creating products that are still informed by AI and very technologically structured, but just have very simple user interfaces, very intuitive things, right? So you're not just bombarding people with this like AI overload.
Can I do a plug for our Next Gen conference where we'll have a panel on touching grass, which kind of dives into that very topic? I came up with a name, Touch Grass. But this is so true because especially when you think about Gen Z and younger generations, there is this need to disconnect. And there are these brands that are coming out with ways that you can do it. There's that app or that company Brick. Have you guys seen this?
I thought about buying one, but I didn't.
Yes. See, there you go. Like, and then there's that tin can phone where it's like an actual like tin can phone. Talk about back to basics. So that kind of thing. But also on the disconnecting, everyone I've talked to in the last few days, or so many people, are all talking about how 2026 is going to be a lot of experiential marketing and a lot of in-person stuff. And especially from the store perspective, brick and mortar has been, making a comeback for years and since COVID the last few years, but even more so. And there's just new elements that are just being added, but it's definitely a need for this physical shopping. It's not going away.
Yeah. EJ, you made me think, what's the craziest thing you saw on the floor at CES? I saw like the 130-inch whatever TV, which I would love. But what is the craziest thing you saw?
I don't know, crazy. John Deere had a massive exhibit, and just the size of this. I'm gonna get the name wrong. This big, largest piece of farm machinery I've seen in my life.
Tractor? Was it a tractor? Is that the name? Is that the word you're looking for?
High tech.
But I mean, the reason is there is because it's like using like very intelligent operating systems and all that. There was a
Sounds
lot of
dangerous.
robots, as you can imagine. One of the vendors it had a booth that literally was only staffed by a robot. There was no humans involved, and it was sort of a stunt. But it was like they're built it as the first ever like humanoid only CES exhibit. So they had the robot there answering questions from passersby. Um, I was actually impressed by the Kodak display. Kind of again speaks to nostalgia, but they have a lot of new products out. They kind of seem to be leaning back into the old Kodak kind of branding, which was kind of cool to see. Atari was there. They had these little tiny miniature, like Miss Pac-Man, uh, tiny like arcade machine that you play Miss Pac-Man like with your like thumb and finger. And so again, just very simple things that I think consumers are sort of yearning for right now.
Amazing. Yes. All this kind of tension between new and old that we've been talking about. A couple quick questions to wrap us up. I'm wondering, as both of you were speaking to people on the floor at these conferences, how would you describe the mood of executives about the year ahead in one or very few words?
I mean, CMOs are not known for being pessimistic, so it's like pretty obvious. I mean, a lot of optimism, a lot of excitement. There's no negativity there.
I would like actually say yes, that's what they say publicly, but I think in their back of their minds, there's a lot of nervousness and sort of anxiety about, oh my gosh. I mean, you're being thrusted literally into reinventing your role about you're having to now orchestrate all this stuff rather than just, overseeing day-to-day campaigns. You're being pulled into meetings with chief technology officers, chief financial officers. What's your role in the C-suite now? I mean, this has been a theme forever, but I feel like this year, more than ever, because it's also integrated now.
Yeah, it's a scary time because of that backlash that we talked about earlier. Like you can't get it wrong. Like it can be problematic on from a consumer facing, but also from like a revenue perspective if you choose the wrong supplier or this not. So yeah, but they're good actors, so it's hard
Yeah,
to
I mean, just on agentic AI and just like as you're implementing processes where these things are going to start to do things on their own. I mean, one wrong
yeah,
move and you could be like
yeah,
making a mistake and not catch it until, you lost a few $1 million versus back
exactly.
when humans were running the show, you had you were a little bit more in the front row.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking. Our tech and media teams have been doing great coverage of these new tools that are fully agentic media buying things. And I'm like, whew, it's a lot of money to just hand over to a robot and say, be free. My last question, circling us back to what we were talking about at the beginning, after going to these conferences and being on the ground, if you could amend or add a footnote to any of our 2026 predictions package, what would it say?
I would just say the desire need to simplify everything is what I will look for.
That's a good one. We've talked a lot about complexity today.
I'd like to simplify a few things. But yeah, I guess I mean going back to what we said around touching grass, which kind of follows that too, the disconnect. I don't think I put it in my retail predictions, but I think something around that and seeing more of these newer companies that do try to tap into that. With new products that help people disconnect because it is tough. You're addicted to your phone, you're addicted to the apps, the TikTok to TikTok and everything. So I think we'll see more companies popping up to help with that.
Yeah. Yeah, much less, potential legislation that we've seen internationally about trying to limit usage and things like that, especially for young people. So it's a changing world. I'm excited to see what happens next. And I thank you both so much for helping us understand it all a little bit more.
Thank you, Parker.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found that conversation as enlightening as I did, please like this episode and consider following Ad Age Insider so that you're never behind on industry news. If we talked about anything in this episode that you want to read further on, I'll have links to further resources from adage.com in this episode's description. Thank you to my guests, E.J. Schultz and Adrianne Pasquarelli, and thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.